And this is a little study we did in Boulder very early on, because again, trying to get some numbers together of what are the environmental benefits of the trees in Boulder. And you'll see this little one, or if you go to that website out of the Research Center in Cal Davis, they've done this kind of thing for cities all across the United States. So again, they've really gone through and helped communities when Fort Collins is struggling with a low economy and not a lot of sales tax, and they're thinking about a major cut to the street trees. They've actually, Fort Collins had the study going, well, you know, that's okay. If we have to make that decision, everybody's going to have to take a cut. But I want you to know what we're cutting. Not like, oh, well, so we don't get a red fall one year. It's like, well, we're really actually cutting some benefits as part of our infrastructure. So at the minimum, our idea ought to be, let's have the criteria we know when we bring that back, not just, well, we'll come back because that, you know, this is a frou-frou, this is an extra. Well, it's actually pretty integral for a whole variety of reasons. And so again, this is a neighborhood in an older part of Boulder where the red is the buildings, and these are all the mature trees. And most of these are older buildings. So to be fair, most of them were built in an era where air conditioning really wasn't a possibility. But most of them don't have air conditioning because they don't need it. We have cool nights other than the last night. You know, so there again, and there's a bigger tolerance because that's the other one, not only the nature deficit disorder, part of that is no tolerance for variation. I'm used to living in an apartment, I've never seen nature, and I can't literally tolerate anything between 68, more than 68 to 72. So the good news is about our environmental systems, our HVA systems, we've made some of that. But also we actually, culturally, we start to lower the tolerance level. And so we know that about people who live on farms. They're willing to live through whatever, right? But even people who lived in cities in the old days, slept on their front porch, had, you know, little evaporative coolers. I mean, all kinds of ways that they adapted rather than just plugging in. And I'm not suggesting it's an either or, but sometimes I think we forget that we have more capability as humans to live with some of that, and sustainability may call on us to do more of that collectively because it's just either too expensive or just simply not available. Or now that we recognize what the impact is that somebody else has to do, so I can not have that, those tree canopy, you know, to pay for that, those are going to be different decisions. And here's even Pittsburgh, you know, summary of Pittsburgh's tree, 2005. Total benefits, $2.4 million a year from street trees in Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh's a big city, but as somebody said, 2.4 million. I mean, in terms of the city budget, it's probably some little minuscule thing. But as a friend of mine said, if that was laying on the sidewalk, I'd probably pick it up. But it's not insignificant. So it's another one where, you know, it's not 100%, but it's not zero. And until we get numbers on these kinds of things, what these benefits we get, we don't value them in the appropriate way. And again, I'm not suggesting that we only make, you know, trees and things an infrastructure thing. They have a whole bunch of aesthetic and cultural benefits. But historically, when budgets have gotten tight, if this is the only line you had to go, it didn't save the day. They got cut anyway, and that happened in Boulder. So the good news is we're starting to get better information on that.
How does a tree provide energy?
It doesn't provide energy. It reduces the demand. So basically, if you shade a building, you can reduce the energy required, right? Or heating. If you have a line of if you look at a farmhouse, again, typically, a lot of ones out there, when they're out on their own, they've done a lot of principles. We'll learn more about that tomorrow. The whole north side is conifers. You drop the velocity of that wind, even 30%, the desiccating, the cooling ability of that wind is dropped substantially. It saves a tremendous amount of energy. So
it isn't that provides
no,
energy,
exactly, yeah.
So if cap and trade passes, then how significant of a change do you think the CO2 line would be?
I'm sorry, with what?
If cap and trade passes, how significant of a change do you think there'd be?
That's going to become the leader. Because like right now when we did the Boulder one, I think the market that, yeah, well this is low. I was going to say when we did the Boulder one, I think it was like $6 a ton. You know, and I think sometimes in the next 10 years it's going to get up in the tens of dollars per ton. So if we're paying $40 a ton for offset, you know, all of a sudden these things, I mean, because this is probably not based on this is probably less than $10 a ton. So, and again, that's an inexact science trying to get what is that really, but again, Greg McPherson and others have said, well, for the urban environments, we've actually done a pretty good study. We kind of know what that cycle is. How you guys want to price and value it, there's a little bit open to, but at least we know what the mechanism is here. Culturally, how we're going to value that, we'll have to set that. But if we start making that price, and the reality is that's going to drive a tremendous amount of things, which is, again, back to the business case for the risk people. Not a bunch of the Wall Street guys got green all of a sudden. They said, I don't want to invest in 11 coal plants in Texas, because if we gave us a financial model that says we're going to make a lot of money based on $6 a ton carbon, and it goes to 60 or 600, I don't want that in my portfolio. The risk is too great. Now that's going to change once we decide collectively and that becomes more stabilized, what that price is, whatever it is. Just like oil. We don't like it, but if oil ends up being $150 a barrel, we'll adapt and kind of move along with that. Investment will still happen, that kind of thing. But right now, when the swing is somewhere, oil is somewhere between 30 and 150, I don't want to take a 40-year investment risk on that, right? So, but I think it is going to be a much, much larger driver because it's going to begin to encapsulate some of those away costs. Because the carbon, now that's one for carbon. At some point, how do we have a line item that says, what's the cost of that dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico? That's got to show up somewhere. I don't know how you quantify it and how you begin to value, but it literally has a cost to all of us. Just like every year comes out the cost of sitting in traffic, Well, we kind of bemoan it and it's billions of dollars, but I don't know, who is it? Who's the funny guy? Will Rogers? Or maybe it's Yogi Berra, Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it.